This is for We the People News. Again, not attorney, don't declare to be attorney. This is a learning video and a little bit of news. That way it informs you of the decision you make when you look around you and never straightforward. Always keep your mind open because you just never know what's going to grab you and teach you or harm you. Now, a couple of videos ago, we discussed a crazy guy. And I think this video goes kind of in the same text of that, but it's defined a little bit better. Alright, so you may have to watch this again a couple of times and fully understand the trickery of words that the government is using upon you to commit harm. Alright. Sorry about the sipping sound. I'm having my coffee. Let's just go ahead and dig right into it, right? Shall we? As far as I know, I did everything I need to do.
Word, U.S. Code, Section 1, or just U.S. Code 1. Okay? If you put that in your search window, you'll find Cornell Law is usually one of the most common sites that'll come up, and it's a good one for most sightings. And I want you to look this up, and I want you to go home and think about this. 1 USC 1. You can just even type that, 1 USC 1. And this is the first paragraph of the entire U.S. Code. So do you think it might apply to everything that follows it? It sure does. So let's take a look at what it says, maybe what it doesn't say, and what clue it gives you as to how things are going to go if you try to argue these codes with these people. Okay? So 1 U.S. Code, Section 1, words denoting number, gender, and so forth. Sounds like it could be just about anything, doesn't it? And so forth. Stop when you read this stuff. Don't read it fast. If you have to read it backwards, because you'll find that they will quite often tell you what's going on here. So, 1 USC 1, words denoting a number, gender, and so forth. That's pretty open-ended. So, what do they tell you here out the back? In determining the meaning of any act of Congress. Okay, here we go. In determining the meaning of any act of Congress. So you say Congress says this, well, let's make sure that is what it says. And then this is the word, here's the phrase I want you to write this down, memorize it, put it on your forehead, remember it in everything you're looking at. Unless the context indicates otherwise, remember that, because there's a lot of things that where the context does not indicate otherwise, then you assume you know what it means. They tell you right at the beginning how the game's to be played. Then it goes on and says words imported to singular include and apply to several persons, parties, or things. Well, we could parse grammar, syntax grammar that thing, couldn't we? Words importing to plural include the singular. Well, that'd be a grammatical error, but hey, they set the rules that they can do that. Words importing the masculine gender, including the feminine as well. Words importing the masculine gender include the feminine as well. Well, that's kind of confusing. No wonder we're confused on that issue, aren't we? Words that used in the present tense include the future as well as the present. How about that one? So is it the future or the present? We know that in studying syntax, everything has to be in now time to even be contractual. But here they're changing up the rules. In other words, they're leaving it open to interpretation. The words insane and insane person shall include every idiot, insane person, and person non compos mentis. Now, this is a good one because sometimes they'll say, you need a competency hearing. Maybe you're insane. Well, they can make just about anything fall into this category. And of course, insane is a negative preceding word, which means no sane, right? So there you go. IN is a no meaning word. The word person and whoever includes. By the way, when you see the word include, it doesn't mean it includes other things not listed here. It means it includes only what's listed here, because if it included other things, they'd have to list those things too. This is a tricky one. Include is a really tricky one. People think, well, that also might include other things. Not if it doesn't say so. The word, because we're talking about legal stuff, right? The word in person and whoever include corporations, companies, associations, firms, partnerships, societies, and joint stock companies, as well as individuals. And when I click on the word individual, it goes into a little more detail about what that means. Go look that up. Officer includes any person authorized by law to perform the duties of the office. The office. Okay? Now, I watched the TV show The Office, and I think it's pretty funny. I didn't know that it had something to do with being an officer or a person, but it is entertaining. Now, you think what I just said is kind of strange, but actually, that's sort of a strategy you can use with this stuff. Signature or subscription. Now, this is one I get a lot of questions on about how do I sign? When we syntax, we autograph. We don't do any of these things. But signature or subscription includes a mark. When the person making the same intended it as such. Okay, so you know that I intended this, right? But what if you qualify that mark? All rights reserved, under duress, without prejudice. Does that at least clarify what you intended? Darn right it does. But remember, if you just put a mark on there, they're going to consider it. You can put an X on there, that's still considered a signature. But when you spell it out, it does help clear up the intent. Oath includes affirmation.
And that's what I was talking about with prejudice, without prejudice, on a couple of other videos. Now, I didn't know about this video, but I'm glad I found it, because it kind of defines a little bit more what I was talking to you about in easier words, since I do things just right off the top. Like I accidentally found this today. So I had to show you this today, but it was right off the top. You know, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. I'm going to stop it here, because this is what I'm talking about. Anyway, proceeding forward.
And sworn includes affirmed. Now, I'll tell you, swearing is something when I was using bad language. And you think, well, but that's what they mean. That might be true, but do I know what they mean? Okay. Writing includes printing and typewriting and reproduction of visible symbols by photographing, multigraphing, mimeographing, manifolding, or otherwise. What's otherwise? Now, they leave a lot of open-ended stuff here. And this begins to play its way out throughout the entire code. And you'll find the same kind of thing going on in the state codes too. So don't think just because you're dealing maybe with the state issue, this doesn't apply. You could probably find at the beginning of your state statutes something similar to this. It depends on what state you're in.
Let's see, and this is clearing a couple of other things up that I talked about in other videos. All right, this is word trickery. Okay, back in the old days, they call it witchcraft, spells, right? Because they're using twisted words to confuse people. And, you know, of course, people literally took it as witchcraft, right? But what it really intends, is the intent of it is to confuse the people. And that's exactly what you're doing. Kind of like, when you go and take a driver's license test, right? I sit and think about it, and for some of y'all, it's been a while, right? When they ask questions that made it seem like all of the questions was correct, but they was looking for the one particular answer. This is the reason why some people failed the written test, is because of the question, how it was written, right? They use trickery of words to make you think that all of them was correct, and it may be all correct to your opinion. You volunteered the information that they was correct. Okay? Again, it's the trickery of words that they use. Every law has this. When you go in there, people just go in there and read it and okay. But they're not really understanding the definition of the law of their use. Right? It's the definition they use, but not the definition we use, which when we end up, wink, wink, help vote the law in, right? We're under the impression this is to help us, when in all actuality, the trickery of the words twisted that law to benefit. I made a couple of videos ago called the representatives, about a couple of different laws. Look, the way I'm reading this, it's kind of saying this and this and this, right? Well, it's not really supposed to say that. They're absolutely wrong. That's exactly what it's supposed to be saying. The difference is when I read it between the lines, between the trickery of words they're using. So you may have to go back with a couple of videos and listen to the phone calls I was using, right? So I was more in line of being correct of the interpretation, but I was going by the interpretation that we, the people, would go by. Not the definition the government would go by. So when the government comes after you, you think, oh, no big deal. Next thing you know, you're in cuffs. And you're thinking you're innocent. But you're going by the definition of what you're using and not the definition of the words they're using. So you sit there and say that you understand everything, when in all actuality, you do not understand nothing they just said. It's trickery of words. Witchcraft, however you want to say it. So, and they can do it because of this right here. Article 1. It plainly tells you, but most people just look at it, read it, and say, okay, no big deal, right? But this guy is going into a little bit more depth of how that trickery of words is drawing you in. And when he said, when they pass laws in their state, you think you understand it, and when you don't. So again, when I did the videos, I told them this is exactly what I thought it was. Well, that's not the intent. Of course it wasn't the intent because it benefited me. Or didn't benefit me, it benefited them, right? But that was their intent. They just found somebody that knew their intent, right? Knew the definition they was using, knowing their games, right? Proceed forward.
But boy, there's a lot of qualifiers here that can manipulate whatever the language is any way they want to make it, isn't it? And is it terrible? Is it deceptive? Is it fraudulent? Well, yeah, in a way it is. I mean, that's why we call it fictitious conveyance of language. They start off by telling you they're going to do this. So if they do it, is it fraudulent or illegal? No. They gave you fair notice. They're going to use gobbledygook. So the question is do you understand what they're doing? Whoops. Do you? Somebody says they're not getting audio, but others are hearing, so I think we're good. Must be on your end. Okay? So basically, guys, you see what I'm saying here? So this is the foundation we start with if you start looking at the U.S. codes. The friend of mine, his name is Kerry. I expect to have him on in the next few weeks. Just depends on when we can work it in our schedule. But he's a master at doing this. So what he does is, you see, you don't want to go in there assuming you know what the heck they're even talking about. Honestly, you really don't want to do that. Because as soon as you act accordingly, I plead guilty or innocent, you essentially are accepting that you understand what either of those things mean. Okay? So the strategy with this is to say that, they're coming after you for something criminal or civil, and you really don't want to play the game. And this will take some practice. So mind you, what I'm telling you is not something going to get overnight. But we create basically, and by the way, this glossary page is in the Start Here now. It's kind of in an urgent folder. I think is really important. Goes in the Start Here first folder in your downloads. This glossary page is an example, and you can use whatever you want here. This isn't just a template. I've changed it for other types of cases. I'll add or subtract a few things. The bottom line is just
Now, I have been known to actually do this, like write this, and actually stop it, take a picture. That way I can blow it up and read it. Okay? I would suggest you guys doing that, even on my video or whatever. But just stop it, take a picture of it, blow it up, and blow it up where you can kind of read it a little bit more clear. Sometimes it works, sometimes it don't, especially with my phone. This is, what's the name of this site? Geez. Oh, UR Law. Okay? And this course right here, y'all, or courses, or this website, however you want to look at it, right? This is teaching y'all of several different ways, if you go onto this website, of how to wink, wink, represent yourself in court. You can't represent yourself if you are yourself, which is another trickery of words they use to get jurisdiction from you, right? They're using their words again, y'all. You cannot represent yourself if you are yourself. You just can't do it. But the trickery of words makes you believe you can. And the trickery of words sounds like you can, right? We go back into all the answers seem correct, but they're still looking for the one answer, right? Well, they made it sound like you can represent yourself. The trickery of words. When in all actuality, you cannot represent yourself if you are yourself. Alright? Another deal is, do you accept responsibility? Your Honor, do you accept the responsibility? Because you keep saying you, and you are over there. So I don't understand how you has to tend to I. So I'm trying to understand you. Because you are you. I am I. You got to confuse them with their own language. You draws them in jurisdiction. Do you accept this? Who's you? Your Honor, you are asking something from I. But I don't understand you because you keep using you. So how do you fit into this category of what we're talking about. You know, things like that. And I got a cough. Hang on. Excuse me. That's the word trickery, y'all. The trickery of words. Okay? You gives them jurisdiction every time. Do you understand? You. The you is a very catchy word. And you need to quit accepting you. Because you just flip it. It's them. Right? If you don't accept you being you, then you are not you. That confused you. Trickery of words.
As you walk in with whatever they're doing, you say, so you want to talk? Okay. Let's say it's traffic court. I got a glossary page. I want to use, these are the terms I understand. I want to make sure we're all using the same language. Now, does that sound a lot like what we do with syntax? Sure, we say, if we're going to proceed forward, let's use a common language, syntax, and so forth. This is a simpler way of doing something like that. But you have to develop it and think about it for yourself. It has Title 1, Section 1 at the beginning. Maybe you could use also the state version of this, okay? You'll probably find there's something like that available online. And then it goes into different words. Money, fiat money, Federal Reserve notes. Because they're probably going to want you to pay money at some point. So why don't you say, let's make sure I know what definition of the word you're using. Okay. Straw man or party, specie. And it talks about Article 1, Section 10. What is a loan? Contract, corporation. These are terms that are going to come up in most cases. Person, which definition of person is? There's a ton of definitions of person. This is Black's Law 6th edition. Artificial persons, pro se, and propria persona. You look these up and you basically create this glossary page. And all you're saying is, and whether you don't have to use these if you don't want to, but you're saying, like an appearance, merchandise. What you're saying is, well, we're going to probably use a lot of these certain words, so what I want you to do is, to proceed, we're going to use these words. And they're going to say, no way, we're not going to do that. Because they don't want to bind themselves to something, right? So you say, well, if you're not going to use my glossary, go ahead and ask your questions. And then every time they ask a question, listen for a word that they ask you. In fact, if you want, we might even try a little role plays, see if we can figure out how to do this. But let's say somebody's asking you a question. Maybe you, because of the interaction, it would be hard to do with everybody, one person at a time being muted. Maybe in the chat window, you could say what kind of they ask. Let's say they're asking you a question in a case. How might you respond? Okay, and then our goal is down the road to have you answer those questions so that you can see if you can correctly respond, because most people are going to simply try to answer the question, and as soon as you answer, it's game over. Everything we're talking about just gets thrown out the window. But if you answer with a different definition of a certain word, and that definition is actually accurate, then you're not lying, you're not cheating, they're just not giving you a fair definition. So they can't get you to go down that road, and you're putting the burden of proof back on them by answering essentially by not saying you really understand the word. You don't have to say that, though. You simply answer it with a real thing. So if somebody wants to maybe pop a question in the window, for example, they will refuse the glossary, but you say, well, fine. If you won't, then that's fine. Go ahead and ask your question. This is part of the technique, is to get them to deny it. Okay? So then when they ask you, they may say, did you fill out that form? Okay. Well, as a matter of fact, when I was a kid, we used to put cookie dough on a piece of wax paper. We'd stamp a thing around it like the shape of a heart, or shape of a square, shape of a diamond, and that was the form that we used. Now, you think that sounds crazy. But what is a form? And did they give you a definition of it? Did they tell you? Will they give it to you? You see what I'm saying? They are asking ridiculous questions, but what they're trying to do, they're not asking you the actual question. They're trying to see if you will accept responsibility and then try to prove something when you have no burden of proof. This way, it flips it right back onto them. Because they're not, they're
In essence, when we talk about wink wink, sovereign people and all that kind of stuff, and stand as a man and all that, when we talk about boxing them in, right? This is essentially what they are doing to you. They are boxing you into a corner. Because the burden of proof is on them. But what they do is flip it where the burden of proof is on you. Right? And because you answered a particular question, now you boxed yourself in instead of boxing boxing the court in. So everything still has to do with jurisdiction, but it also has to do with boxing the courts in. We talked about how, some of these people that, we look at how they lose in courts when they're not really losing, but being transferred into another court. We talked about how they can do that within a common law jurisdiction rules. All right, but the key is the sovereign or challenge jurisdiction and all this kind of stuff. You box the court in. They had no place to go, so they had to go to another court. But they don't have to go any further once you volunteered to box yourself into that corner. Right? They tricked you to answer questions to box yourself in. And you volunteered for it. Because you understand something that you never understood. You just thought you did.
there because of something on a piece of paper, a ticket, an indictment, a summons. You have a right to ask about every piece of that. And you don't sit there and do it in writing. It's something you'd have to play out live and you have to practice. Okay?
Now, that being said, I believe this is one of the reasons why the Fifth Amendment says you don't have to answer questions, right? Because they knew that somehow or another the courts was going to create something to box you in. And by not answering questions, couldn't they be boxed in, right? But once you give your driver's license and insurance registration, right, you answered a question voluntarily. You gave them jurisdiction, whether you realize it or not. Okay? And they said, well, the Texas code this, Texas code that. But, they boxed you in. So you're darned if you do, darned if you don't thing, right? Yeah, it's just one of them incidents that you just going to have to do what you're going to have to do, Are you pissed off enough that they're screwing you over so bad that you are ticked off at them? Is the question. There you go.
Well, I was told being a globe shape was a good form. There you go. See? You just come up with these sort of really logical, actual responses, but not in the context they're saying, because they never gave you the context. And Article 1, Section 1 has all kinds of things in there that don't make sense. Okay? Unless the context indicates otherwise, remember that. Unless the context indicates otherwise, remember that, because that is the key to how you answer.
You see, that's what he's texting. Unless it's otherwise. Well, what you're doing is creating an otherwise. Just for some people who may not understand this. You're creating an otherwise. So when you use a different definition of the words they're using, that the government's using, well, you created otherwise. You boxed them in. Okay?
What context did they give you? Well, you know what I mean. You're talking about that form to fill out for your driver's license. Mean? Yeah, I was kind of mean when I was a kid. I used to kind of pick on my sister. Yeah, I was kind of a mean guy. And it'll make them crazy. They'll go, "What? Answer the question." I did. I answered it honestly. I answered it factually. You said, "What did I mean?" Mean is you pick a word and you just go off on it. That's all he does. He sits there and picks a word out and goes off on it.
Once again, the meetings of the minds, they're not going to have meetings of the minds with you. So they're going to use their definition. And you don't follow their definition. You got to follow your own definition. All right? We may finish this up a little bit more because this video is a little long.
You know, they say, "Did you drive that car?" Well, do you mean use? Because there was only one of us that could drive at one time, typically when you're driving a car. That's an answer. It sounds really weird, but it's actually the right answer. They're trying to get you to say yes. Now you just tried to. Now you got to prove more. They're going to ask you a follow-up question. If they can't ask you a follow-up question, they can't box you in. In fact, you box them in.
Exactly.
And yes, somebody's saying, "Judge, there's no definitions listed. How can I understand your question?" Again, you don't really want to give that away. See, you're saying you just want to shut off. Now, you don't want them to keep asking and keep taking. You already did the definition thing. You handed it to them first. They refused. You said, and every now and then you can say, "Well, since you won't go off my definitions, go ahead and ask your question." You're not saying you won't. You're not giving me definitions. I'm saying you got to prove I know the definitions of whatever you're saying. But you don't just say that. You do it. Your actions speak louder than your words. So you got to learn how to play it as a game, so to speak.
Checkers, or chess, not checkers. You're playing chess.
Lawrence writes, in writing they call it show, not tell. So go there and do a show. They ask you a question, pick one word out. Here's the guy on screen. Did you know Robert Kraft? Well, I knew a guy. He was kind of sneaky, but he was kind of a crafty guy. But as it turns out, he's actually the guy that makes cheese. See, they can't go to the follow-up question. "Oh, why you just go around just asking a question?" Just answer the question. Are you saying I'm not answering your questions? Which question? Was it questions or question? And you're throwing burden of proof back on them. Yeah. Who says,
Video is long enough. It was just a basic idea. Sorry about it being so long. Alright, this is Diesel for We the People News. Bye, y'all.